Welcome back to another episode of the Mills Knows Bills podcast. I'm Mills Bender, CEO and host of the podcast. If you missed last week's episode with Brett Childers, you are missing out on all the nuggets of information around commercial lending, aka financing for your business. So if you missed that, be sure to go back and check that episode. Listen in on all of his key pieces of information. And if you have any questions regarding your business, his phone number is linked in the show notes below that episode. We do have Brett back on this episode today, but we're going to turn the tables this time. And so from Brett's perspective of commercial financing, he's going to ask us some questions about how CFOs can really help the business owner stand out. So Brett, I'm in the hot seat today. Go for it. Pick my brain.
So, we obviously talk about lending. How are you preparing your business owners to actually get in line to get a loan? And when do you know that it's right for them to have a loan? So
first, we like to look at their solvency every single month, their ability to repay debt. And so we have our metrics, which tend to be a little bit more conservative than what they're actually going to need for the financing side, because there's so many different loan programs out there. And so every loan program is going to have a different requirement on their ability to repay debt, their revenue markers. And so we look at having conversations with the business owner, asking them what their goals are. And then we take that information and we go to our network and we'll ask them, okay, if this business owner wants to open up a new location, what are the parameters for that type of loan? And then we take that and we use that as metrics in that particular client's analysis on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And we work them towards that goal. As they get closer to achieving those markers, we then put them in contact with the right individuals if they don't have any contacts, ensuring that they are able to qualify when they take that information to the lender, rather than continuing to pull credit and never able to actually achieve it. So it's all a matter of aligning the financial strategy with the financing strategy, which is it's not always the same thing. There are some overlaps, but as you know, it's kind of like a debt payoff versus credit score. They don't always go hand in hand. That's right. And then to answer your question, when are they ready? Well, I like to look at solvency, and I like to make sure that they have a game plan for leveraging that money. If they're just going to have money sitting on a credit card, it's not actually getting them a return on that investment. That's not leverage. That's liability. That's not doing anything for them. And so as we ask them, why do you want to get a loan? What is it going to be used for? At what point are you hoping to receive a return on that financing? Those are all metrics that we keep track with them, so that way we can make sure it's giving them the return that they want.
That's right. So with a new prospective business, what are the most important things that you want to know from that initial conversation with that new business?
So are we operating under the assumption that they're new to me, but not new in business? They've been around for a bit. New to me. So in our onboarding month, we ask a lot of different questions, but we actually start with their profit and loss, and we'll look at their cyclical trends. We'll look at where most of their revenue is coming from. Most of our clients want to scale their business to eventually sell it or just be an absentee owner. And so in order to get to that point, we need to mitigate their risk internally before they want to sell it. And so we look at having no more than 50% of their revenue coming from one particular client. We look at the expenses that they have, making sure that it's actually good expenses. What do I mean by that? Well, oftentimes we'll see as revenue increases, operating expenses increase at the same rate. And it shouldn't necessarily. It will increase, but not at the same rate. And so we try to make sure that we improve their bottom line, their profit, because that's where their ability to repay debt is going to come into play. That's where they get to actually see a return on the asset that they're building. And so in that first month, we look at their P&L, we look at those trends, we ask them what their goals are, and then we help them align those operational goals against their financial trends, helping them project where they can be and coming up with realistic milestones. Keyword realistic, because they'll often say, well, I'm going to double in revenue. And that's just It's not always the case. So
Or
the
possible.
onboarding, so the onboarding month is really giving their financial data a story.
Sound like a commercial banker.
A little bit. Without the lending side.
A little bit more to it than that. But
without the lending,
Yeah. So I think it's so important to get their thoughts of what they want to do, what their endpoint is, and every step in between. Where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 15, or even retirement and transitioning out of there? What are your biggest challenges when you're working with a company that you see? Like, is it? What have been your experiences? What have been your biggest challenges? Is it something like with basically you have a company that is so ingrained in one thing and had to bridge them out of that to get more diversified, or I don't know.
There's so many. There's so many. I'll say because you're in commercial financing, I think this example you'll appreciate it a lot more than maybe some of the other guests. We had an issue where a client was growing faster than he could actually afford.
Okay.
And so he landed a deal that was more than his entire year-to-date revenue with just one new project, which we can talk about the whole diversification thing another day. The issue that I'm going to highlight on this one is the cash outflow superseding the cash inflow.
Right.
And so it's a huge issue, especially when it's $350,000 cash infusion necessary within 2 weeks, and then an additional $200,000 3 weeks after that, all before the first progress payment. And so we need $550,000 within the first 6 weeks of accepting this project, of which maybe $100,000 is in receivables. Maybe $100,000 is in the checking account, but how are you going to bridge the remaining $350,000 gap? And that project is going to take up all your time. All of your crew is going to be on that one particular project. It's an incredibly profitable and lucrative project, but you can't afford to wait that long to receive the first progress payment. So what do? You get financing to help bridge that gap. And so it was critical for us to not just identify the cash flow of when that would be an issue, but identify the solution and making sure that the solution was solving the long-term problem. It wasn't just putting a Band-Aid on the issue.
That's right.
And so he actually just closed on this financing recently. He was able to bridge that gap with more than he needed, which is awesome. And so as he is collecting these progress payments, we're making sure that we can repay the debt. We make sure that we set some aside so that way we don't always have to rely on financing. We get to rely on financing if we want.
That's a great point, is repayment. How are you going to, not what the bank wants, how do you want to repay it?
Exactly.
And you're managing your money. Manage your debt is just as important as managing your income, right?
Yeah.
So, wonderful. There's so much in there. But
I told you it's a lot.
It's a lot. But you hit on a lot of key points. And again, you sound like a commercial banker. We're looking at those things of how a project's going to work. With that project, obviously it was lucrative enough to work. And I'm assuming that the financing within that there were reasonable terms that helped out, that met that need too. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's important.
I think the critical part for this business owner too was knowing his numbers and understanding what he could actually quote. I actually had...
Well, because if you don't have that, how can you do it? Right. And then don't dip your toe in the water if you can't
afford it.
Yeah, you can't back it up.
Right. Yep. So he knew what his expenses were. He knew what he wanted his profit margin to be. And by knowing his numbers, and we've been working with him for about 18 months now. And so knowing where his overhead was at and knowing where the market was at, he was actually able to capture an additional $200,000 of profit that he wouldn't have previously captured. And so that $200,000 right there is enough to help pay back a portion of the loan or keep in his pockets. And so it's a great all these little factors, people want quick fixes, but all of the factors have really been leading him up to this moment.
He wouldn't have realized that without you.
He's smart. He would have realized it.
He would have found that $200,000.
No, but
okay, that's what I'm saying.
No.
So that's what trusting advisors.
Yeah.
Knowing what your passion is, trusting advisors to find those little things that help you along the way. And that's a big thing, right?
Absolutely.
It's a huge thing. So what do you think is the most important thing in your business that you do? What do you think? What gets you going? What's your passion about this?
I would say it's not necessarily what makes me happy, but it's what makes my clients happy or our clients.
I understand
right?
that.
Giving them the peace of mind around their finances, that they know everything is being handled. They have somebody in their corner on the financial side to help them make better decisions. That's what really has them appreciate us more. And that appreciation is what really drives us as a company. We know that we're doing good in their life. We're making an impact, not just in their business, but all of their employees, their personal lives, everybody that it touches. So it's a really cool ripple effect that we get to fix.
So how in depth or how shallow can you get with a client? Like what are your your umbrella of products or services that you would offer? Like how, what's the starting point and how deep do you go?
So we'll start with asking them what their personal goals are, but we don't necessarily get too in depth on the personal side.
Right.
That tends to come up in conversation if they want to just pick our brains on it, which is fine. But we like to know what their personal goals are, because then that helps us better strategize the business finances. If you need $100,000 a year to cover your personal expenses, but you're only paying yourself $50,000, okay, well, we need to embed that into the business plan.
That's right.
If you want to sell your business for $10 million and that's going to be your entire retirement plan, maybe we should diversify that a little bit. But now we need to work backwards to figure out what your multiple needs to be and what your EBITDA or gross revenue, depending on your industry, needs to be in order to realize that $10 million. By when do you want that $10 million to be realized? And so we'll ask some of the key hitters on the personal side, but then we use that to make a much deeper impact on the business. It's almost like pouring antiseptic on their financial wound. And if you pour antiseptic on the business financial wound, the personal side gets the scab and the Band-Aid too.
That's right.
So we'll focus on that.
You'll do daily bookkeeping. You'll do or one touch a month, or
how often are we in there?
Well, that's what I'm asking. So if I was have a business and I say, man, I may need a powwow with you every other week, or I need you every single day, you can handle all that.
So our set packages each comes with 3 deliverables cadences.
Okay.
So we're in the accounts every single week.
Okay.
We like to have a pulse of where they're at. Joy, the student who's shadowing me, she looked at some of the weekly reports that we were doing yesterday. She's like, wow, that's a lot of information. That's a lot of work that you do. Yeah. It's not a little bit of work. We like to look at that information because if you're our client and you know what hits the fan tomorrow, I have a pulse on where your business is at because I'm that in depth in your business every single week.
That's right.
It's not enough just to do those weekly reports, though. We're also there every single month. And the monthly deliverables have a little bit deeper of information based off of how the entire month performed.
That's right.
And then quarterly, we're selfish. We want to talk to our clients. If they want to talk to us more often, yes, love it. But most of them are blue collar. Most of them are on the construction site. It's difficult enough to get them on the phone once a quarter. So we have that scheduled so we can at least take an idea of where they're at with their goals, see how things are changing in their business, what needs to change in the next quarter. And so we're in there every week, every month, every quarter.
So you mentioned blue collar. Do you more focus in that area?
We market to that area, but I will say about half of our portfolio right now is white collar, simply through referral marketing. I've done a few speaking engagements and conferences in those industries, and then that's how that side kind of grows. But blue collar is really where we we tend to focus our efforts because it's such a rapidly growing industry.
So would that be like roofing companies?
Roofing, construction, trades, home services, anything that involves working with hands, right? Okay. And building a business outside of just one individual person.
What made you go down that road initially?
There's such a huge growth pattern over the next few years. I think it's about 5% that is expected to grow. And so as a lot of baby boomers leave those businesses, a lot of my generation and even younger are swooping in and picking up these businesses. Some of them have no clue how to run an actual business.
And I was about to say a real neglected industries, neglected of how businesses run.
A lot of blue collar businesses are actually just owned jobs, not businesses, right? The
I got
business
money
owner,
in the checking account at the end of the month. I'm good.
Right. The business owner, if they leave the business goes too.
Yeah.
And so we're wanting to fix that because we're seeing such high demand for those services without enough supply. And so the right people in place that actually want to scale it and run it as a business, not a job.
That's right.
They need the help. They don't know where to turn. And so that's really, really where we're headed in that. But I know we're running out of time. I see Miller in the background waving at me. Thank you, Miller. If you are a business owner, as I mentioned earlier, who's looking to scale through the use of financing, reach out to Brett. As I mentioned, we recorded an episode that launched last week. Listen to it. Reach out to him directly. His phone number is in the show notes below that episode. If you're in a situation where you would like to learn more about our CFO services, you can book a call using the link in this episode's show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I hope you learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing you next time.